Well, welcome back to the next part of our video series, You Can Grow. So today we're talking about a shave and a haircut. So we're going to look at different ways that you can be pruning either annuals, perennials. We'll talk a little bit about shrubs as well. Okay, so as things are starting to grow, we don't want to get them out of control. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So just as a reminder before you get going, we do have a website, schmidtgreenhouses.com. And as we come into Mother's Day, certainly feel free to take a look at the website. For those of you who have some gardening questions, we have an Ask the Expert forum on there, so we can try to answer some of your specific questions there if you do have. Right now we have online ordering at the greenhouses, and next week we're starting with, we have phone ordering this week, and after Mother's Day we're starting with online ordering, so keep an eye on the website for that as well. Alright, so as we get going today, I'm going to pass it over to Holly, and she's going to talk a little bit about pinching back and pruning in the annuals.
Just maybe to clarify too, we've certainly had lots of phone calls asking if we're open and what's really happening at the greenhouse this season. It is certainly a different season, and what we've done is, as Kurt mentioned, we've gone to phone ordering, and next week our online store will open up. But we also have access at our front end. So if you're looking for things for this weekend for Mother's Day, we've got a little smattering of planters and gift baskets and things like that at the front, as well as our gift certificates. So if you are comfortable to come in, we've got a sanitizer inside the front door, so please come on in and have a little visit. We can't get out under the plastic where we all are, but we've definitely got some product available for sale there. So
Make them happy.
Exactly. So back to pruning. Like Kurt said, we definitely don't want to let our plants get too wild and crazy. Pruning is just a great way of just maintaining shape and keeping blossoms to keep performing for you. So I've got a couple of examples here, and I'll start maybe with the pansies. This one, it depends on what you like to. This is a bit wild and free looking, but in my professional opinion, this one has gotten away on us. So it certainly happens in here, and we do spend a lot of time and energies trimming and pruning our plants. This one is in need, where this one is not. This one has been pinched back, and you can certainly see the difference. Obviously the size is quite different. But this one is also going to come out all in these little spots, going to come fresh buds and just be a really more compact and tighter look. So what I would do with this one, and it may scare some of you, but I would remove all of the flower. I'm not going to take the time to do that this morning, but you don't want to just take this like this and pop the head off. That doesn't make for a pretty plant. What that does is that gives you a whole bunch of twigs like this that are never going to produce anything. So you don't want to leave those. I know I've seen some baskets around every once in a while, and people have just popped the heads off their flowers, and it really ends up not looking very pretty in the end. So what you do want to do, I'm going to remove that tag just to be able to get into the plant a little bit better. What you want to do is actually take this branch right down to where it meets the larger stem and take that right out. So this one, again, this one has really gotten away on us a little bit. It should have been done probably a week ago. This one, I would actually take this whole thing right back to here and take all of that off. So you don't want to leave any little stick, because that's just going to dry up and die and not look nice. You want to take the whole thing right back down to where it meets the branch and remove that right off. The nice thing with pansies is that they will actually stay in a vase and look very nice for a little while, so I'll probably decorate my desk with these at the back. But that's what I would do with this one, and again, I would take all of these right back to the next set, and you can see there's new growth coming on this side, and I would not take all of that just yet. I would take the majority of what is blooming and leave that so that that's going to come on, and you're going to have some flower again in another few days. So this one would turn into something that looks like this, and then you've got all these beautiful nice buds coming along. So that's pansies. Petunias, basically the same thing. Again, this one, we've waited a little bit too long on this, and just by all means, we would not sell you this if we have a chance to get to it before you take it home. We would pinch this back and set it aside and bring out the next crop of plants that haven't quite gotten this far ahead of us. But if you do buy a plant like this, absolutely take it back and take again all the color off. And part of the reason for removing the color is that your plant is still quite young. Maybe I can show you roots on that. They are coming. If it's a little wetter, it comes out a little easier. All right, give it a little tug. There we go. So this is coming along really nicely, but there's not a whole root mass there, so it's still a little bit on the young side. And so you want to feed those roots more than you want to feed the flower. So if you take the color off, you're going to develop stronger roots, and you'll get a healthier plant later on in the season. So yeah, this is just the difference between one that needs a pinch and one that has been pinched. So again, no color just yet, but it's certainly coming along. And you can see this one is just about ready to bud. All of these have been pinched back, and it's just a much healthier and nicer looking plant. So,
compared to that guy, for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of night and day, isn't it?
And you can see here that this one actually has been pinched right in here, and again, right down to the next set of leaves. And that's where it's going to develop again from that spot. So do you want me to do tomatoes right away?
Sure.
Okay, so I've got one of our tub tomatoes here. And this is maybe not the exact same plant because I didn't keep track of where we put that. But this is about the same size of plant that we showed you a week ago. And this one is now developing what's called suckers. And I'm not sure how well you can see this. We're a little sunny behind us here, so I can't really tell what's showing up on the video. But this one is developing little sucker leaves that are coming out from the main stalk, but between the main stalk, that's a good one there, between the main stalk and its main leaves are these little suckers. And on an indeterminate plant, which this one is probably not, this is likely a bush. What have I got here? No, this is a Sweet 100, so this is indeterminate. So if you let those just keep growing, they're never going to produce fruit, but what they will do is absorb nutrients and take away from the fruit that's going to produce if you were to remove them. So all you want to do with those little suckers is remove them just like that. You can use scissors if you want. Sometimes scissors can contaminate your plant, so it's best just to use your fingers and just take those all right off, just as simple as that. So nice, easy peasy. There's tomatoes.
Yep.
All right.
Makes a big difference on the overall plant, especially as they start to mature and really
Right.
start to grow quickly.
And all the nutrients is then going into the fruit that is really where you want it to be. All right.
All right, we talked about other ways of transplanting tomatoes, planting them deep, taking off some branches. So if you need to take off some of those lower leaves, you don't want tomatoes laying in the soil. That's a good, easy way to get some disease. So that's just another little note. As you're suckering them, maybe take off a few of the bottom leaves if they're sitting on the soil. Okay, so we're going to switch over to some of the other things maybe outside. I'm going to briefly talk about a number of different perennials and shrubs. I think we'll do a little more in-depth video later on dealing specifically with fruit trees, but we're going to just talk about shrubs in general. So really, again, we're talking about haircuts. We're talking about trimming them back, making them either produce better or just look better or just be a healthier plant. Okay, so for perennials, there's a whole lot of perennials out there, and a lot of people are big perennial growers. For perennials, it's there's a wide variety of them, but for the most part, what you want to think about with your flowering perennials is simply deadheading. So as Holly talked about, taking off those flowers that are spent. Okay, so this is Centaurea. It's just growing really nicely now. It's producing these big flower heads, and right now it's in great shape. But soon those are going to start to fade out, and they're going to start to form seeds. Okay, so they're going to take up lots of energy, and they're going to sap the energy from the root, which is not what you want. Okay, so deadheading and picking back to those next leaves is a really important way for all the flowering perennials, just to allow them to gain the energy, because they need to store up the energy for that next year's production. Okay, even more so than the annuals, because they have to make it through our lovely northern winters. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about a few things that we need to prune at different times of the year. And as we come into spring, people are thinking, oh, what do I need to prune? And there are some things you don't want to prune in this time of the year. Okay, so a lot of early flowering shrubs, like lilacs, and I have a lilac somewhere here. Where'd my lilac go? Oh, there it is. I left it all on its own. So lilacs, here's an example of a lilac. You can see this one's leafing out really well, but it's also set its flowers for this spring. It's set it last summer. Okay, and so a lot of people will go late in the fall or in the autumn at some point, and they'll prune back their lilacs. Well, what they've done is they've removed the flowering buds for that season, and so all you're going to get is leaf. Okay, so lilacs are one example of things you do not want to prune in the spring. You want to prune them pretty much after they're done flowering in the spring, late spring, early summer. Okay, and around here sometimes that's a lot later than we hope. Okay, but just remember, if it's an early flowering one like a lilac, forsythias are another example. Okay, there's a few different ones. Hydrangea, there's a couple different hydrangeas out there. For those of you who are familiar with the paniculatas, like a PG hydrangea, they blossom on their own old wood. Okay, so those ones, again, you don't want to be pruning early in the spring. Wait until they bloom that spring, and then once they're done, you can prune them for the next year. There are a whole series of hydrangeas called smooth hydrangeas, and you can cut those right back to the ground each year. Okay, so those are a little different. So if you have more questions about a hydrangea and what type they are, certainly come and talk to one of us or shoot us a message on the Ask the Expert. Okay, but again, hydrangea, the paniculata, the old ones that form on the old wood, you want to leave them for, you don't want to do any spring pruning. All right. Next, there's a lot of the shrubs we sell are things like potentilla and spirea. They flower all through the year, really good vigorous plants. Those ones pretty much you can, for the most part, you can trim them anytime. They're such flowering and such vigorous plants, they can survive whether it's a fall or a spring or whatever. Pretty much whenever you're able to get at it, that's okay. Ideally, it'd be best to do them in the fall. Give them a good trim, not too late. You don't want them to freeze back. If you cut back, and especially if it's got a little bit of new growth on it from maybe get a warm fall, you don't want that new growth to be freezing back. But give it a good trim and give it some good shape so that it's not going to look too overgrown in the springtime. Okay, so here's an example of a potentilla, okay, and it's starting to just bud out a little bit, and you can see it's actually been, in the fall, it's been kind of shaped. Okay, it was probably quite a bit larger, maybe more like this, and it's been trimmed back to give it that nice compact shape, and it's going to have a nice kind of orbital shape when it blossoms out. Next thing, foliage plants. Okay, so maybe some green things like an alpine currant or nine barks, some of those. Again, you want to be careful in the fall. You don't want them to, you don't want to prune back if you've got a whole bunch of new growth. Okay, so you want to be able to let that wood harden off. Okay, so if you wait until really quite late, it might be, you're out in your woolies and trimming it with some gloves on. Okay, but let those things go really dormant and make sure that wood is nice and hardened up before you trim it. Otherwise, it will get a little bit of dieback on the tips, and sometimes you may not be too worried about that. Okay, but if you are concerned, maybe it's a weaker shrub or a little small still, that's something to keep in mind. Rose bushes, certainly, for the most part, we're just trimming back, like those flowering shrubs, trim them back after they flowered. Okay, and you want to cut them back, you don't want to just cut the head off, you want to take that stem and take it back to a good junction. In the springtime, really all we're doing is we're cleaning up damage from the winter. Okay, so we're not overly aggressive with our pruning. As I said, we'll talk more about fruit trees in another video, but really what you're doing in the springtime, you don't want to do a lot of pruning in the springtime. Really what you want to do is just open it up a little bit. Okay, so if you have some branches that are crossing over, or you've got some winter damage, again, you can take a look at removing those. But don't do any aggressive pruning with apples. Especially in the spring, it makes them more susceptible to fire blight, which is a very common disease that happens in the apples and a lot of the fruits. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. And then just quickly want to talk about evergreens. So again, evergreens, you don't want to do too much pruning. For example, with a cedar. Firstly, with cedars, I'll put the cedar between Holly The cedars, you don't want to prune them really hard because they only have the green growth on the outer third typically, or even less. So you want to do it a very fine trim when you're doing cedars. I know cedars are being trimmed already around here quite nicely by the deer. Okay, but if you do have a cedar that actually is surviving, be very easy on the trimming and do that typically in the summertime or late summer. If you're looking at spruce, spruce and pine and some of those other ones, spruce is good to prune in, again, early to mid-summer. And another one that is more specific is the pines. And if you have a pine, like a mugo pine or some of the tree pines, you'll find that they do candle. So at the end of the needle, they're going to get a fairly long, it looks like a long tube, and it's going to break open into needles. And if you can cut that candle in half shortly before it bursts open, that's the best way to prune pines. What that does is, just like holly pinching back those annuals, it causes them to stay more compact. Okay, so that's particular to the pines, and a really good thing. If you have a mugo pine, it keeps it from expanding and getting too much out of control. Yeah, so that's pretty much most of them. Just a couple other things to just wrap up when you're talking about edibles. Raspberry canes. Okay, so most raspberries are not, there's ones that produce on their first year fruit and there's ones that produce on their second year fruit. Most of the ones that we have here are producing on the second year fruit, and after that second year they're done producing. So you need to cut out those second year canes because they're just going to start to rot and produce some disease. For the first year canes, for most of the raspberries, once they get to about 3 or 4 feet, just pinch the top off. Again, it's going to cause it to thicken out and just branch better. If it is an ever-bearing variety though, don't. Let it grow, let it do that whole thing for the year, and then it's going to be...
Do you want to give a few names of those varieties?
So for example, some of the typical ones that we have for raspberries are Boyne and Souris. Those are kind of too old-fashioned. They're nice and hardy. They're good producers, good eaters. Okay. In the past we've carried some other varieties, but those are kind of our go-tos at this point. Okay, so if you are not sure of the varieties, what you have, come and talk to us, put something on the Ask the Expert, and we can certainly talk to you about that. Okay. And yeah, so raspberries are becoming a little more complicated even than they were a few years ago. And then lastly, grapes. For those of you who are grape growers, sometimes all you want is the vine, and you'll notice they're very vigorous growers. Okay, so if you want that, great. You don't have to prune that much, although it's nice to prune them to shape, and also, again, to get some good airflow so you don't get disease. But if you're a fruit producer, you really want to get some grapes for wine or juice or jelly or whatever the case may be, really the best way to get a grape going is have a vertical stalk, have those branches going laterally, and then prune off the branches from those lateral branches and prune them fairly aggressively. You do want them to be pruned back. That really does stimulate new growth, and it also thins out a lot of the leaves that are going to be sucking up energy from the fruit production. Very much like what Holly was talking about with tomatoes. Alright, so I think we've kind of covered everything for yeah, shaving a haircut. Alright, so keep your plants under control, keep them looking pretty, and we will talk to you again next week. So have a great Mother's Day weekend.
Thanks.
And yeah, come on out and see what we got. Planters, we've got roses, and we got lots of hanging baskets, and we have gift certificates for those who can't really decide, and we always sell lots of gift certificates. So hope to see you out here. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.